You remember that moment, don't you? The one where something inside you twisted just enough, and you didn't stop it. You felt it rising, quiet at first, then louder, sharper, and instead of questioning it, you followed it. Because for once, it made you feel bigger than your own insecurity. You were standing there, surrounded by people who looked like they had everything figured out. Their voices were confident, their laughter effortless, their presence loud without even trying. And you felt exposed. Like every thread of your identity was being silently judged. The way you spoke, the way you stood, even the person beside you. And that's where it started to rot. Because instead of standing beside the one person who chose you without conditions, you started seeing her through their eyes. You forgot how she looked at you when no one else was watching. You forgot how steady she was when your world felt like it was collapsing. In that moment, she stopped being your partner and became your weakness. So you did what fear always does when it wears the mask of pride. You push her down to lift yourself up. And the worst part? It worked. For a few seconds, it worked. People looked. They listened. You felt seen, not for who you are, but for the version of you that betrayed something real just to fit into something fake. And your ego fed on that attention like it had been starving for years. But then there was that silence. Not the loud kind. Not the kind filled with tension and whispers. The quiet kind. The kind that forces you to hear yourself clearly for the first time. And in that silence, she looked at you. Not angry. Not broken. Just done. That look didn't attack you. It didn't argue. It didn't beg for anything. It simply revealed the truth you were trying to escape. That you had crossed a line you didn't even realize existed until it was too late. And still, you let her walk away. That's the part that stays with you. Not the words. Not the people. Not even the humiliation you caused. It's the fact that deep down, you knew you should have stopped her. You knew you should have called her name, taken it back, fixed something before it shattered completely. But you didn't, because your ego was louder than your conscience. And that's how it happens. Not in some dramatic explosion. Not in a moment that feels like destruction. It happens quietly. In a choice. In a sentence. In a version of yourself you decide to become for just long enough to lose something that actually mattered. You thought you were gaining respect, but what you really lost was the only person who saw you without needing you to prove anything at all. You felt the moment you opened your eyes that quiet wasn't normal. It wasn't peace. It wasn't rest. It was something heavier, something that sat on your chest before you even moved. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room. It replaces something that used to live there. She was still there. That's what made it worse. Same kitchen, same routine, same morning light falling across the same walls. But none of it felt familiar anymore, because the warmth that used to exist in the space between you was gone. Not broken, not damaged, just removed. And you try to pretend it wasn't real. You asked simple questions, used a normal tone, acted like time would quietly erase what happened. Like one night couldn't possibly change everything. But deep down, you already knew this wasn't something time fixes. This was something time reveals. Because she didn't fight you. She didn't bring it up again. Didn't throw your words back at you. Didn't demand an apology or explain her pain. She just stopped. And that's when it started to sink in. Because anger would have been easier. Anger means there's still something alive, something fighting to be heard. But this was different. This was someone slowly stepping away without making a sound. Someone deciding, piece by piece, that you were no longer a safe place to exist. And you felt it in the smallest things. The way her voice lost its softness. The way her presence stopped reaching for yours. The way your day no longer mattered to her. Not because she wanted to hurt you, but because something inside her had already shut the door. That's when the house changed. Not physically. The walls were the same. The furniture didn't move, but the feeling it disappeared. Conversations turned into short replies. Moments turned into empty space. And suddenly, being in the same room felt lonelier than being alone. You started noticing things you never paid attention to before. The silence at dinner. The absence of her laughter. The way she moved around you instead of with you. Like you were no longer part of her world, just someone passing through it. And still, you told yourself it wasn't that serious. You held on to that belief because admitting the truth would mean facing something you weren't ready to face. That one moment of ego had started a chain reaction you couldn't control anymore. Then someone else said it. Not her. Not you. Someone outside the situation. And that's what made it harder to ignore. Because when another person sees your mistake, clearly, it strips away all the excuses you've been hiding behind. It forces you to look at your actions without the comfort of your own justifications. And for a second, just a second, you felt it. That discomfort, that realization trying to break through. But you pushed it down. You told yourself it's your life, your relationship, your rules. You convinced yourself that no one else understands what happens behind closed doors. And maybe that's true, but what you avoided was understanding yourself. Because deep down, something had already shifted. You started noticing her distance not as mood, but as meaning. Not as a phase, but as a decision. And that realization didn't come all at once. It crept in slowly, through moments you couldn't ignore anymore. Like the night you saw her getting ready to leave. No explanation. No hesitation. No need to inform you. Just movement. And in that moment, something inside you went quiet. Not angry. Not reactive. Just aware. Aware that you wanted to ask questions but didn't deserve the answers. Aware that you felt uncomfortable but had no ground to stand on. Aware that the connection you once took for granted was no longer yours to claim. That's the breaking point no one talks about. Not when everything falls apart loudly, but when it slips away silently. When you realize that you're still physically present in someone's life, but emotionally, you've already been left behind. And the hardest truth? You didn't lose her in that moment. You lost her the night you chose your ego over her dignity. This was just the silence catching up with you. You didn't mean to follow her. That's what you keep telling yourself. Like it just happened. Like your feet moved on their own and your mind had nothing to do with it. But that's not the truth, is it? You followed her because something inside you was already breaking and you needed to see how far it had gone. The moment she stepped into that car, you felt it. That sharp pull in your chest. Not jealousy, not even anger. Something deeper, something colder. The kind of feeling that whispers you don't know the person you're living with. And still, you kept going. Every second of that drive felt heavier. Every turn made your thoughts louder. You tried to make sense of it, tried to fit it into the version of her you had built in your mind. Simple, quiet, ordinary. But the closer you got, the more that version started falling apart. And then you saw it. Not a house. Not something you could explain away with a quick excuse or a logical guess. This was something else. Something that didn't match anything you believed about her. The kind of place that doesn't just belong to people, it defines them. And she walked into it like it was hers. No hesitation, no confusion, no pause. Like she had never been anything less. That's when your reality cracked. Because respect doesn't lie. You can fake words, fake smiles, fake appearances, but respect? That's instinctive. And the way those people looked at her, it told you everything you refused to see. She wasn't small. She was never small. You just needed her to be. And now, standing there, watching a world you didn't even know existed, you started to feel it. That slow, creeping realization that you hadn't just misunderstood her, you had reduced her. You had taken something real, something deep, and forced it into a shape that made you feel comfortable. Because if she was more, then what did that make you? So you stood there, trying to hold on to whatever control you had left, trying to make sense of something that no longer made sense. And when someone asked you who you were, you said it. Her husband. But even as the words left your mouth, they didn't feel real anymore. Because the truth was already shifting beneath your feet. And then he appeared. Not loud, not aggressive, just present. The kind of presence that doesn't need to prove anything because it already knows its weight. And when his eyes met yours, it felt like he could see straight through every excuse you ever made. And in that moment, you understood something without him saying a word. You were out of place. Not because of your clothes. Not because of your background. Because of your actions. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. But it hit harder than anything you had heard before. Because it carried something you couldn't fight. Truth. Not the kind you argue with. Not the kind you twist to fit your story. The kind that stands still while everything inside you starts to collapse. You tried to explain, tried to reach for something, anything that could soften what you had done. But there was nothing there. No justification. No misunderstanding. Just a moment you chose and the damage it caused. And then it came. Not anger. Not punishment. Understanding. The kind that cuts deeper than rage ever could. Because he didn't accuse you of not knowing her status. He didn't care about what you didn't know about her life, her background, her world. He pointed at something else. Something worse. You never tried to know her at all. And that's when it shattered. Not the image of her. The image of yourself. Because suddenly, all those moments started replaying, but differently. The way she stayed calm when you were frustrated. The way she listened when you spoke, even when you didn't deserve it. The way she carried herself with a quiet strength you mistook for weakness. It wasn't that she couldn't respond. She chose not to. And you took that choice and turned it into an excuse to feel superior. That realization doesn't come gently. It hits all at once. It strips away every layer you built around your ego and leaves you standing there with nothing but the truth of who you've been. And the worst part? It's not what you lost. It's understanding that what you lost was never small to begin with. You just didn't have the depth to see it. Everything didn't collapse all at once. That's the strange part. You expect destruction to be loud, obvious, impossible to ignore. But this was quiet, systematic. Like pieces of your life were being removed one by one, and you were forced to watch without knowing how to stop it. First, it was your work. The place where you once felt secure, where your voice carried weight, where your identity felt stable. And then suddenly it didn't. No explanations that made sense. No dramatic ending. Just a shift in how people looked at you. A distance. A decision already made before you even realized you were being judged. You told yourself it wasn't connected. But deep down you knew. Because reputation doesn't disappear overnight unless something inside you is already cracking. And once it cracks, everything built on top of it starts to fall. Then came the silence from people who once stood close. Conversations became shorter. Invitations stopped. The same voices that used to laugh with you slowly faded out. Not because they changed, but because they finally saw something in you that you had been hiding from yourself. And then there was her. No fight. No final words. No scene to hold on to. She just left. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Because you didn't even get the chance to defend yourself or pretend you could fix it. There was no door slammed in anger. Just an absence so complete, it forced you to sit with everything you had done. That's when the real confrontation began. Not with her. With yourself. You sat there, in that empty space, replaying moments you used to brush off. Words you thought were harmless. Reactions you justified. And for the first time, you didn't twist them to protect your ego. You saw them exactly as they were. And it wasn't easy, because it meant letting go of the version of yourself that always had an excuse. The version that blamed stress, pressure, other people, anything but the truth. You weren't misunderstood. You were wrong. That realization doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels heavy. It strips you down. It leaves you with nothing to hide behind. But at the same time, it does something else. It gives you a starting point. Because once you stop lying to yourself, you finally have something real to work with. And that's where the shift begins. Not in a big, dramatic moment. Not in some sudden breakthrough where everything changes overnight. It starts small, quiet, almost unnoticeable. You wake up one day and decide you're done blaming, done pointing outward, done pretending that growth will happen on its own. So you begin, not for redemption, not to win anyone back, not to prove anything, just to become someone you can live with. You change your routine. You pay attention to how you speak. You start listening, not to respond, but to understand. You notice how people feel around you, not just how they make you feel. You learn that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you practice when no one is watching. And slowly, something inside you starts to rebuild. Not your old self. Something better. Not perfect. Not flawless. But honest. For the first time, you're not trying to appear strong. You're trying to be real. And that changes everything. Because when you finally face who you've been without running, without excuses, without hiding, you stop being someone you hate. and start becoming someone you understand. 6 months changes more than time. It changes how you see yourself when no one else is looking. You walked into that place again, the same kind of room that once made you feel small. Same lights, same noise, same kind of people measuring each other without saying a word. But this time, something was different. It wasn't a room. It was you. You weren't scanning faces for approval. You weren't adjusting your posture to fit into someone else's standard. You weren't carrying that quiet desperation to be accepted. For the first time, you stood there without pretending. And then you saw her, not across the room as a memory, not as a regret playing in your head. Real, walking in with the same calm strength you once misunderstood, the same quiet confidence you once tried to shrink. And in that moment, you didn't feel that old urge to prove something. You just felt still, because now you could see her clearly, not as someone beneath you, not as someone to impress others with, but as someone you failed to understand when it mattered most. And when you said her name, it didn't come from ego. It didn't come from a need to reclaim anything. It came from truth. That's why your voice didn't shake. That's why your words didn't hide. Because when you finally said it, it wasn't just an apology. It was ownership, not just for that night, but for every moment you chose pride over presence. Every time you dismissed her without even realizing it. Every second you made her feel like she had to shrink just so you could feel enough. And the strange part? You didn't say all that out loud. You didn't need to, because for the first time, your words matched who you had become. And she saw it. Not immediately, not with emotion, but with attention. The kind that looks deeper than surface change. The kind that asks, is this real or just another version of the same man? And when she spoke, it wasn't heavy. It was simple. You've changed. Those words didn't feel like validation. They felt like recognition. Because change isn't about proving something to others. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to pretend anymore. Someone who can stand in front of their past and not look away. For a second, something inside you moved. That old instinct. Hope. The kind that tries to rewrite endings. The kind that whispers, maybe this time will be different. Maybe now that you understand, you can have it back. But life doesn't always work that way. And when she answered, it didn't break you. Because you were ready for it. That's the difference growth makes. Before, rejection would have felt like an attack. Like something to argue against. Something to fix. Something to win over. Now, it felt like truth. She didn't say it with anger. She didn't say it to hurt you. She said it because her life had moved forward in a direction that no longer included you. And instead of resisting it, you accepted it. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. That's when you realize something most people never do. Closure doesn't come from getting someone back. It comes from no longer needing to. You weren't standing there trying to rebuild something that had already ended. You weren't chasing a second chance to erase your past. You were simply showing up as someone different. And that was enough. Because when you told her you didn't expect anything, you meant it. Not as a line, not as a defense, as truth. And when she looked at you one last time, there was something there that hadn't existed before. Not love, not longing, respect. The one thing you tried to take from her without ever earning it. And now it was there, not because you demanded it, because you finally understood it. As she walked away, you didn't feel that panic, the need to hold on, that fear of losing something again. You just watched, calm, grounded, certain, because for the first time in your life, you weren't trying to win someone else. You had already faced the hardest thing there is, yourself, and you didn't walk away from that. That's why you didn't follow her. That's why you didn't call her back. Because this time, you weren't chasing an ending. You were living with what it gave you. And what it gave you was something far more valuable than getting her back. It gave you clarity. It gave you accountability. It gave you a version of yourself that doesn't need to break someone else just to feel whole. Some stories don't circle back. They don't give you the ending you once wanted, but they give you something else. A moment where you finally understand what it cost to become who you are now. And standing there, watching her disappear into a life that no longer belonged to you, you didn't feel empty. You felt complete. Not because everything worked out, but because you did. And for the first time, that was enough.